My lecture this morning, I talked about animals that I would divide apart. Right side goes to the lungs and the left side goes to the systemic circulation. And the one question I also stress that the blood pressure to the right is lower than the blood pressure to the left. If I would put that into a question of what's the significance of that, would you be able to indicate to me why? Really, but significant is lack of formation of lymph. Because when pressure is high, you get some leaking of fluid from the vessel into the surrounding tissue. And that tissue is drained back to the cava. Well, the last thing you want, it would interfere with lung function if you had lymph getting between the intricate mechanism between the alveoli and the capillaries of the lung. So the pressure is lower primarily to prevent any lymph formation in the lungs, and this increases the efficiency of the lungs. Okay, so that's the reason why. Now, again, in birds, however they quite manage it, they don't have a lymph system at all, because they're trying to cut down the weight. They're efficient flying machines, and during the whole process of evolution in flight, they've cut down completely on the production of lymph. But most of the animals have lymph systems, and of course it's the lymph glands that are present in the lymph system. These are, if you like, mechanisms for preventing any infection from getting back into the body, and of course it's the lymph glands that are getting inflamed. Both foreign material, bacteria and so on. There's also lymph glands that enlarge to prevent spread of cancer cells and so on. You're familiar with the whole concept of neoplasia, although that's not considered in my lecture today. So that's the reason. The right side pressure is lower than the left side. So pressure has a lot to do. And one of the things I think I emphasized this morning, when you have the closure of the foramen ovale here, it's a flat valve. You can see the way it's actually constructed. If you can imagine if the pressure was higher in the left atrium than the right atrium, that would close. That flap would close. It's the pressure that keeps it open at the moment. And that's what happens. When an animal starts to breathe, pressure differential changes. Pressure in the left, higher than the right, that valve closes, and you get an adhesion occurring, and that's what closes the foramen ovale. I'm not sure what stimulated the ductus arteriosus to close once the animal stops breathing for itself. I have a very good friend who is a sales with me, a cardiac surgeon. I asked him the other day, he ties off ductus arteriosus in infants and children that don't fail to close. He's not sure really what the stimulus for closing is in the normal situation. It seems to just build up the fibrous tissue. It narrows and narrows and closes. What the control for that is it's very clear. The foramen ovale is very clear. It's the pressure differential, and you get the flap closes and you get an adhesion. So that's the foramen ovale closes in that way. You're all clear on the role of the ductus arteriosus and the foramen ovale. They're vital in the uterus because the placenta is doing all the work in the lung and all that. So you're also, I hope, clear that cardiac output has to be the same for pulmonary and systemic circulation. So pressure differential, the cardiac output has to be the same. And in contrast, of course, I mentioned amphibians and reptiles and so on have divided hearts or some other mechanism, like the embryos, to cope with the situation where the lungs are not functioning or need to function not at all in the case of an amphibian, the body will go on, and so on. So it gets shunted from one side to the other. And it's resistance. The lung that collapses, it increased resistance to blood flow, and that's what leads to the change. And of course, turtles, for example, go to sleep in the bottom of a pond. Visitors used to be fascinated with the turtles slept underwater. And of course, they do this by simply sending the blood around a different route to the systemic circulation, and it's again the different blood vessels at the back of the oral cavity that manage to control that circulation.
that oxygen assimilated to there, not as efficiently as the lungs, but nevertheless sufficient to keep them flowing, but the metabolic rate is so much lower. And crocodiles, I mentioned, also have completely divided ventures because they can spend long periods underwater as well, without apparently having to breathe. Now the other thing that's important, I mentioned this morning that heart rate varies very consistently. And as a rule, the smaller the animal, the faster the heart rate. There's an inverse proportion here. And this is because really smaller animals have a higher metabolic rate per unit of body weight. So therefore the heart needs to go faster. And there's an increased relation between heart rate and body size applied in the species and amongst different species. For example, a small dog may have a resting heart rate of 120 beats per minute, whereas a larger dog, Labrador size or bigger, would be down to 80 beats per minute. And of course, the slowest heart rate of all in the animal kingdom, which are also, is the elephant, which is a heart rate of between 25 and 30 beats per minute. Humans, of course, as you know, would have a heart rate of about 70 beats per minute. The domestic cat, 125 beats per minute. And again, in a mouse, 400 beats per minute. That's an extraordinary rate of action. It's hard to imagine how the blood actually flows efficiently when it's moving at that rate. But the supreme example of all is that a shrew, which would have a heart rate of something like 800 beats per minute. Extraordinary. I'm never very sure how the dynamics of that actually work when somebody reaches as fast as that. And of course, younger animals have a faster heart rate than mature animals. When an animal is born, it has a faster heart rate. When you take a horse, for example, put this into a foal, it has a heart rate of about 60 to 70 beats per minute at 8 weeks of age. And at 5 years of age, when it's certainly mature, you're down somewhere to 30 or 40 beats per minute. So a young animal has a faster heart rate than it's old. The bovines would be the same. Calf would be 120 or 140 beats per minute, whereas a cow at a year old would be somewhere like 80 beats per minute. And of course, don't underestimate, there are physiological factors that affect heart rate. Excitement. Now normally, heart rate is completely under control of your nervous system, of course. But if an animal is suddenly being chased, and you get adrenaline increase, of course you get an increase of heart rate, because the consequence of having to be frightened or flee from a predator is that you need more energy, the muscles have to work harder, CO2 levels rise, and so on. So you do get an increase in heart rate when that happens. And of course, muscular exercise, if an animal runs, it will have an increased heart rate that's driven by oxygen demand, the CO2 levels build up in the blood, and the receptors in the aorta pick that up. And of course, higher environmental temperatures will also increase heart rate. If an animal is having trouble thermoregulating and it needs to lose more heat, the more blood that goes towards the skin, that's how the animal is going to lose the temperature. And I'll talk about thermoregulation next week. I'll talk to you about that. When an animal needs to lose heat, it needs to increase the blood supply to the skin, where you get sweating and evaporation and so on. Or if it's a dog that's panting and it's passing air rapidly over its tongue, they're not hyperventilating incidentally. I asked a question like this once and I got a very funny answer. If you watch a dog panting, it's not taking blood, not taking oxygen into its lungs as it pants. It's just passing air rapidly over its tongue as a cooling mechanism. If it actually hyperventilated to that extent, it would of course completely upset the normal oxygen CO2 levels. It doesn't do that. So it's just when it's panting. Of course, every now and again, it does exchange air with its blood in its lungs, but not every pant. That's the difference. It's using its tongue to reduce temperature and pushing air over it. And of course, the more common way is for animals that sweat to sweat copious quantities of sweat, and that evaporates. And of course, we all know evaporation causes cooling. And animals that have eaten a big meal, there's a lot of digestion going on. Again, you'll have an increase in heart rate to deal with the metabolic demands that induces in the system. And of course, animals that sleep will have sometimes a significantly reduced heart rate because they're resting, the metabolic demand is not there, so the heart rate goes down when the animal is sleeping. It's very hard to determine the heart rate of a sleeping animal, because of course you wake it up and
What about a snake that has a big meal when it's aggressive?
sorry?
A snake has a big meal when it's aggressive?
Yeah, well then its heart rate is up considerably because it's increased in size of the heart, because the metabolic demand is high to digest the meal. So then the heart rate comes up while it's digesting. Snakes are extraordinary. I mean, you go 6 months without feeding, and then they can respond both in gut length and in the size of the heart and push the blood around. So that's what. So the metabolic rate goes up after it's fed and then slowly reverts back to normal. I wish I could have demonstrated snakes feeding in a zoo situation, but it's not something. Probably you're feeding dead animals, of course. We did in a circus once in Dublin, feed live rabbits to the snakes, and they charged extra people when you see the snake eat the live rabbit. It was awful to get involved in that partnership. That would be a stock that. And then there was a zoo in China where you could buy a horse and then it into the lion enclosure once the lions killed it. Although we enjoy that spectacle when we look at the African plains and the lions hunting, we've an extraordinary relationship with the animal kingdom. I'll talk to you more about that next year in our flying year. But I don't think it's right to feed a live animal as a spectacle to a snake. And you don't need, the snake can be trained to feed on dead animals, feed just as well on dead animals until the animal remains. But is it natural? I mean, one of the great challenges for reintroducing animals back into the wild is teaching the big cats to kill. They can't, if you were to reintroduce a lion or a tiger back into the wild, unless you shoot the animals from the they can't kill. But that's another subject altogether. There's nothing wrong with that. Anyway. So animals that are sleeping have a reduced heart rate. I think a snake that's digesting is not sleeping. Its metabolic rate is high until it digests the contents that's in its gut, and then it then it may go back to. But sleep is hard to define. I mean, we're all familiar. We all sleep for how many hours a night, and the dogs we have as pets all sleep. But just think about it. Some of the birds, for example, sleep on the wing. Do they sleep properly? I don't know. Some of the horses that used to be worked in grand farms never lay down to sleep. They've got check ligaments. They can lock their legs and they sleep standing up. And I mean, sleep as we know it in the animal kingdom is probably rather rare. They don't go to sleep without length of time. And animals, of course, can be ravaged very quickly as well. Anyway, so sleep does have an effect on heart rate. And a resting heart rate is very different than a heart rate following exercise. I mean, a resting heart rate in a horse, as I said, can be 30 or 40 beats a minute. But once it exercises hard, that heart rate goes up significantly. And then don't remember when skeletal muscle and vertebral cardiac muscle, it's electrical activity that stimulates the contraction of the heart muscle. It's completely different than the nervous stimulation that you get to stimulate skeletal muscle. The nervous muscle, the electrical activity stimulates the cardiac muscle to contract and to move the blood around. It's completely different than the skeletal muscle. And of course, it has a slightly different structure. It's striated muscle in the heart, slightly different than the appearance of muscle, skeletal muscle, but that's only on a histological appearance, but it's nervous activity that sets it off. Pulse rates, I mentioned that this morning. That's a measure, of course, of heart rate, and it's the flow of liquid in an elastic tube. That's what the pulse is. And the pulse is a wave of expansion and elongation of the arterial wall produced by the variations in arterial pressure during each beat of the heart. Each time the heart compresses, you get a pulse wave moving down the elastic vessels. And that can be detected and picked up. And I mentioned that it's not used so much in detecting normal rates as far as animals are concerned. It's of course used in humans, but not so much in animals. Always remember that the fluid in an animal is water, but has many substances dissolved in the water. including electrolytes and proteins. And vertebrate blood consists of a fluid plasma and the formed elements, which are the red and white blood cells. And of course, it's the development of the hemoglobin that facilitates the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, significantly increases it, and enables the mammal to receive the oxygen required for metabolism in locations well away from the site of tractaceous exchange in the lungs. The red cells carry hemoglobin, which is the oxygen carrying pigment. But white blood cells are a very important part of the defense mechanism. They engulf foreign material that's present in the blood, and of course there are antibodies as well circulating in the blood produced in response to challenges to the immune system. And there are platelets, which are vital to the process of clotting. I mean, if we didn't have platelets in our blood, we'd be leaking all the time, and we'd be leaking blood all the time. It's an immense network of little tubes and capillaries, somewhat porous, because of course there's substances moving in and out all the time. But it's the platelets that release a series of factors that activate the clotting mechanism. Prothrombin to thrombin, which is an enzyme that causes fibrinogen to change to fibrin. This is what produces the blood clotting that we all know. So animals have a whole mechanism to protect themselves against invading agents. Phagocytosis, where cells in the body engulf a foreign particle. Phagocytosis plays a critical role in defense in most multicellular organisms, like animals that we're talking about. And vertebrate immune systems respond to any invasion of specific antigens, and the response increases with previous exposure. And sometimes that response is lifelong. If an animal has had the disease once, the resistance to it, the antibodies circulating, that lasts for life. Other diseases require frequent either exposures or frequent vaccinations to make sure that the animal remains resistant to the infection. Many of you will have dogs, you will be familiar with, you've got to get your dog vaccinated. You get the stemper every year. The stemper vaccine doesn't last longer than a year, whereas other infections which the animal gets, once it gets it once, so the resistance will remain for life. And of course, humans and mammals have a unique red blood cell without a nucleus. All other vertebrates have nucleus in their red blood cells. Now, why? I don't know the answer to that. You can debate that for hours. They live for the same length of time, roughly 120 days. There was a nasty trick played on me as a final year veterinary student, and I went up to the blood cell, and I looked down, and I saw a red blood cell with a nucleus. And I thought it was an animal with a leukemia, or it was taken from the bone marrow where you make your red blood cells. It wasn't. It was actually taken from the chicken. And I thought it was a very mean thing to do, and I would never do that to anybody else. Suddenly I was looking at nucleated red blood cells. So frogs and chickens have a nucleus, but mammals don't. Now why? I've never heard a sensible explanation for this, because the cell doesn't divide. Why does it need the genetic material contained within the nucleus? I can discuss this for hours with Frank Hugh and other people, and there's no logical explanation that I can see to this. It's historical. Read about it, and if you can find an explanation, let me know. But I don't know of an explanation for why that is. But it's the truth. Mammals and humans have red blood cells with no nucleus. All of the vertebrates, chickens, frogs, have a nucleus. Yeah.
Is that not to carry more oxygen or something? Is it not enables
Well, you see, the hemoglobin is not in the nucleus. The hemoglobin is in the cytoplasm of the red blood cell.
Is that not without the nucleus? Because like the mammals.
Well, you're saying without the nucleus, it carry more red blood
more,
cells.
like
No, because you can measure the hemoglobin content of the red blood cells, and there's not much difference between one with the cell, one with the nucleus, and one without. So it's not a question of space.
But then isn't like say mammalian or red blood cells, aren't they circular? Whereas
Well, they're all elliptical, in fact.
but isn't like reptiles or amphibians, they're like oval shaped?
Well, marginally. But if you measure the hemoglobin content, it doesn't equate to carrying more oxygen without the nucleus, what would suggest. And I'm not sure that the shape is the answer either. It's very hard to, I don't know, I've never Googled that. I don't know what Google can say about that, if say anything. But read about it, if you can find something, it's just an extraordinary quirk. I don't understand it.
What does Frank think?
Frank will argue both sides. Whatever you suggest, he'll argue the other. I have a conversation with him. He doesn't know either as far as but it's just a quirk. But just remember that. I would never play that trick of a student of presenting a slide with mutated blood cells and asking you to identify it. That wouldn't be, I don't think that's right. But look, it's there. It's there. I mean, the number of red blood cells per cubic millimeter varies hugely in the animal kingdom. For example, equids, horse family, would be about 6.9 million per cubic millimeter. And this would vary down to a hen, higher metabolic rate, but a hen would have roughly 3.2 million per cubic millimeter. Pigeons, 4 million. And a cat has 7.2. I don't understand that. And a goat, 13.9. There's no logical explanation either to the number of red blood cells per millimeter that I can see. Why would a goat, any different? It's a bovine, well, it's not a bovine, but it's a ruminant, I mean. It grazes, it doesn't do very much, anything different than a wild bovine would do, and yet it has almost double the red blood cells per millimeter.
Yeah, I was going to do its diet there, because goats and anything and everything.
Well, goats have just a very efficient rumen, but I'm not sure that that makes the blood cells. Why would a goat need more red blood cells than a cat?
Because it's to its digestive tract. Or
well, digestion is, that's only producing the basic protein, fats, and carbohydrates by virtue of the rumen. Yeah.
Could we down to some goats are at higher altitudes than others?
Yes, I mean, yes, because some animals that live in higher altitudes. I mean, if you were to take a llama, one of the questions that I once was tempted to set, but frankly talked me out of it. A mole and a llama have the same problems. Yes, a mole lives underground, very little oxygen, lots of CO2, whereas a llama lives at high altitude with very little oxygen, but not so much CO2. So you could, so both of them have excess red blood cells to cope with that. But I think a goat that lives all its life in a farm or in Glendalough or wherever is not at high altitude, and yet they will all have this high red blood cell count, not due to acclimatization. I mean, when we go, and I say we Homo sapiens, if we go and live at a higher climate, we produce more red blood cells in stimulation because of the reduced oxygen potential. But I'm not sure that a goat living at ground level is the same as a llama. But yet, if you take a blood sample from a llama in the zoo, for example, that's lived all its life at this level, its blood level will still have more red blood cells than you'd expect it to have.
Or then again, could it not be down to an ancestral thing?
Yes, it's almost certainly genetic in some sense, is what you suggested. But again, you know, it's strange. Yeah. And of course, some of the great athletes in the world, of course, in the days before you could, erythropoietin is the hormone from the kidney that controls the number of red blood cells. And of course, you can trick around with that. And even before the days when you could trick around with PTO, you could trick around with blood transfusions. You could get a medic who wasn't very scrupulous or ethically correct to take blood from you. And then before a big race, you could get a transfusion, which would increase your red blood cell count. The famous Lassie Viren, I've forgotten which of the teacher department, he won all the long distance races, almost certain that he had his red blood cells number increased simply artificially by some doctor. And then he won all the long distance races in the 60s. And almost certainly that's what happened. I mean, basically we have no evidence for that except that the results went wrong.
Would you be able to do it?
I think nowadays you could, because you take a blood sample and you look at the number of white and red cells he was carrying. Obviously, it's a bit hazardous because if you have too many red blood cells, the blood will get a much greater specific gravity. It'll be harder to pump around. But I think you can pick up the way you can pick up EPO now very quickly. That's but the trouble is. Talking to the blood testing people is keeping ahead of the tricks that are going on behind the scenes. That's the tricky one. Be careful what I say about other athletes always anymore. And of course, the platelet count is much lower. Between 150,000 and 300,000 platelets per cubic millimeter of blood. That's a lot less than the red blood cells, but yet they're absolutely vital as far as clotting mechanisms are concerned. So it's evolutionary. It's of course, evolution is a lot of they whole. What we're trying to do in comparative physiology is explaining some of the unique physiological changes that are taking place when able to live in the particular niche that they're living in. That's what I hope you're getting at. And of course, as far as homeostasis is concerned, the continued delivery to all cells throughout the body and the removal of waste is vital to a body functioning well. And of course, primarily, this is done by the circulatory system. And regular chemical messengers such as hormones, they have to be transmitted from the site of production, which I talked to you about, to the site of action. And they control a variety of activities, most of which are directed to maintaining a stable environment. I mean, the simple suckling mechanism, where you get stimulation of the teats of the mother, and you get the nervous impulse from that to the brain, and you get the release of oxytocin to stimulate the milk letdown. That's the classic example of the nervous system and the hormonal system working together. But it's essential for homeostasis that many such systems work. And obviously, if a man produces milk, the young has to be able to extract the milk from its mother, and that's the mechanism that works. So the other thing to appreciate is that circulatory system provide a means of rapidly moving materials around the body. Oxygen is obviously one where muscles demand an increased activity. Nutrition, food, the products of digestion are moved around by the heart. Hormones, as I've said, and of course waste, the waste products of metabolism have to be sent to the kidney so the kidneys can produce the waste products. And without a circulatory system like that, the animal simply wouldn't function. It's got to be moved quickly. And I mean, circulatory systems, it's continuously picked up, the oxygen continually picked up in the lung and the gills, and in certain situations animals adapted to going for long periods without that. I talked about the diving animal, I talked about respiration, I talked about the sea, spending lots of time underwater. And of course, blood has evolved special transport capabilities that enables it to move its cargo, if you like, quickly. Oxygen is poorly soluble in water. It's highly soluble. It's the hemoglobin that attaches to it. And of course, the specific components of the blood perform a lot of homeostatic activity. Circulating fluid helps to maintain the pH, for example, of the body. Absolutely vital for normal function to keep the pH within a normal range. And it helps to maintain body temperature, as I mentioned, by absorbing heat from the site of production, getting rid of it in the expired air or to the skin and so on. And the electrolytes in the plasma are important because membrane excitability is vital to many functions, and both the basis of nerve and muscle function depends on the membrane excitability. And electrolytes in the plasma are also important in the osmotic distribution of fluid between extracellular and intracellular fluid. And the plasma proteins play a critical role in the distribution of extracellular fluid between the plasma and the interstitial fluid. We call it balancing agent. And of course, it's the clotting agent that prevents leaking of blood into the lymph system, into the tissue fluid. And the circulating immune cells, and the plasma proteins, the antibodies produced in the form of proteins, they constitute the immune defense system, for which every animal needs in order to provide a defense mechanism to the challenges in its surroundings. And of course, it's heat. Getting rid of heat is important because temperature, the range is important for enzymes and so on to work. And local mechanisms in the vertebrate heart ensure that the heart is itself is provided with all its requirements, nutrition requirements, and so on, without which the muscle of the heart will continue to pump. And of course, the heart is also controlled by the nervous system, and this is influenced, I've said, by adrenaline and the fight and flight hormone. So there are lots of things going on which the circulatory system is important for. It keeps the whole thing working together. Now, in the practical classes which we have later this week, tomorrow, and got majority all coming in, we can't fit you all in once, I'm afraid. We've got to repeat them 3 times. Yeah, anyway, that's because the referendum only takes a certain amount of speech and you get jammed in there. But tomorrow we look at, we dissect a pig, respiratory digestive tract, people call it an omnivore. So you see the development there of the digestive tract to cope with the varied diet. We'll also show you a carnivore with a fox and a domestic dog to show you. We'll also dissect carefully a number of different species of birds, which will have, we'll show you crops and gizzards and all the other things we talked about as well. And then on the following week, we will show you the reproductive system of the domestic hen. We show you an egg being produced. People still stop me in the street years after they've seen that. They now learn where their egg comes from in the morning when they're out for breakfast. Some of them are a bit horrified by the process by which it's produced. I always remember the children in the zoo when we showed them how you milk a cow. They wouldn't possibly, we had the live stream the milk Mercy of Avenue Creameries in nice containers behind them. Not one of the kids would have it, so they suddenly realized it came from a cow, not from a carton. But anyway, so I hope the egg production doesn't put you off, but it is an amazing adaptation. We do that to track ahead where the uterus puts on the shell and so on, and the ova, the rich ova, and so on. And then we'll also show you the rumen of a cow. Important that you see this extraordinary piece of equipment that is a massive fermentation vat where the bacteria ferment away. They'll still be fermenting inside, incidentally, although the animals will be. And how do you have the ethics of this? Somebody asked me, how can you possibly put all those animals down just to show you what's happening in the laboratory? Well, we don't put them down especially. They would have, the cattle and the pig would have been killed anyway. The pheasants and so on, the hen is the end of their economic life, and the pheasants are shot as part of the pheasant shoot, so that's all, they would have been killed anyway. So that's what we're using to show you how these parts of the animal work. So ethically there's no problem. But the rumen is important that you understand, see some of that, look at the different structures, see where the huge amount of fluid is absorbed, and hopefully there'll be a reproductive tract if they're killing heifers that particular day. We'll also be able to show you reproductive tract of the cow, because it doesn't hold the digestive tract. We have the uterus and the ovaries as well. I'm starting to get that. And we'll get that in the dog, we'll get it in the hen, and we'll get it in the in the hopes that the cow of the pig as well. We'll have to see what sex they are. So, any questions? I think can I just functional biology come on Tuesday, and then the physiology and the zoology people are divided into 1 to 3 and 3 to 5 on Wednesdays. So now, there should be a list somewhere.
Yeah.
Somebody has a list. I mean, I wish you could all come at once. And when I tried to arrange this, it didn't work.
Are the functionals all together, or are they divided as well?
Yeah, the functionality are all together. There's no discrimination about this. It was just a way of dividing the class into 3.